Hello, this is Martin.
This is Lauren. We are 2/3 of the band CHVRCHES, and you are listening to the CHVRCHES Podcast.
Number 22 for June 23rd, 2017. Welcome to CHVRCHES Fan Podcast for Friday, June 23rd, 2017. This is the 22nd CHVRCHES Fan Podcast. My name is Steve Holden, and I'm recording this fan-inspired podcast in Southern California near San Diego. Today's podcast consists of the latest CHVRCHES news, the start of a fan Q&A with Bruce from Texas, and part 2 of 4 of an interview that the band did for FaceCulture in 2013, just before the Recover EP was released. The song segment that kicked off this podcast was The Mother We Share from CHVRCHES' first album, The Bones of What You Believe. I noticed for the first time when I searched on this song that Google has a knowledge card of data for CHVRCHES under the genre tags of Britpop, Alternative, Indie Pop, Dance, Electronic, and Synth Pop. I think this suits the band and the song in general pretty well. The single of this song was released on October 2nd, 2012. There was also a Blood Diamonds remix single released with a blue-themed album cover. The music video was released on August 5th, 2013. And of course, this was the first track of the album, The Bones of What You Believe, released on September 20th, 2013. You can send me feedback, input, comments, suggestions on this fan-inspired podcast on Twitter at CHVRCHES Podcast. Just a friendly reminder that everything mentioned in this podcast that has a link will be in the detailed show notes at www.chvrchespodcast.com. You can also subscribe to this podcast via Apple Podcast, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Links are all on the podcast website. You can also listen to all the podcasts via any browser by just going to the website and click on the audio file icon on your computer or mobile device. So before we get to the news for today's podcast, I have a great announcement. Jeff McCall created our second CHVRCHES Fan Podcast bumper using a sample from his first single, Take It or Leave It. And I'll have Jeff's contact info in the podcast show notes, so please thank Jeff if you have a free moment. You can email him at mail@jeffmccallmusic.com. You can reach him on Twitter at jeffmccallmusic or his website, www.jeffmccallmusic.com.
You're listening to CHVRCHES Podcast.
Okay, let's get to the news for today's podcast. There's 6 items I'd like to share that covers new items since the last podcast. So news item number 1. So the other great Steve Holden, and you know the one, he's BBC Radio 1 and 1 extra reporter out of the UK, Steve Holden, who's at SteveH1982 on Twitter. And Steve recently posted a video where he played the song Somebody Else by the 1975 at double speed and noted that it sounded like a CHVRCHES-esque banger. This got a good amount of attention on Twitter and was picked up by online sites like NME.com and Indie88.com and PopBuzz.co. Then Haley, who is at Stay Under the Tide on Twitter, and I'll have a link to her Twitter handle in the show notes, and she was also interviewed in podcast number 12, posted some videos via a question from CHVRCHES Martin Doherty, who is at Doksan, D-O-K-S-A-N on Twitter. His tweet was, "Do CHVRCHES songs sound like the 1975 at half speed. Haley's videos on Twitter played vinyl versions of Leave a Trace and The Mother We Share playing at half speed. And I have to say, I do believe they have the 1975 vibe. I was going to try to piece all these clips together and play them right now, but I think it would actually be a better experience if you go to the nme.com article and listen to the clips there in order and follow along with the tweets. And links will be in the show notes to all the tweets and the news articles. Check that out at the show notes at churchespodcast.com. News item number 2 from Lauren Mayberry fans on Twitter is the news that Lauren Mayberry joined the band Paramore on stage last night at Usher Hall in Edinburgh, Scotland, singing a rendition of Paramore's song Misery Business. So check out the links in the show notes to pictures and a short video of that song. News item number 3, as a follow-up to our mention of Lauren Mayberry and Justin Long's visit to the Girls' Home Orphanage in the last podcast, I got a thanks for supporting us email from the Girls' Home coordinator who said that they expect a video with Lauren in it to be released soon, so please be on the lookout for that. If you want more information about this orphanage, then please go to thegirlshome.com. And if you're able to, then please consider a donation or a monthly commitment. Thank you very much for that. So news item number 4. So what is the latest news related to Church's third album, which is also hashtag CHV3? The latest update from Ben, who is at VaderJaws on Twitter, is, and I quote, "Do I still have your attention?" More on that question in a moment. But since the last podcast, the band has been relatively quiet on social media regarding album number 3, as they appear to be focused more on their work and on enjoying time off. Back in May, Lauren tweeted a flashback photo with a caption, "Remember when we used to play shows? Now we just watch TV and eat pizza and write records." From their studio in New York 2 weeks ago, Ian tweeted a picture with the caption, "Robin, fetch the bat moog." And from Martin, a picture of an electronic guitar made its appearance in his Instagram stories. Martin also posted a joking tweet back in May that the new album would be 2 emojicon symbols, sad and fire. While we guess this is a reference to the Emojicon movie recently released, fans nonetheless had fun replying back with interpretive guesses and suggestions on the related Church's third song titles. However, the most intriguing post on their new album came from Martin on June 12th, stating, "We made a sign for the studio to help with writing and production." The post included a photo of the sign which reads, "Do I still have your attention?" complete with Church's styled E's, U's, and A letters. While the photo also featured their ET mascot turned away and blindfolded, the resounding answer from the fans was, "Yes, Martin, you and the band still have our attention." And that's end quote. And thank you very much to Ben for such a great update. I really appreciate the help. So news item number 5, the songwriter, producer, musician Goldroom, who's at Goldroom on Twitter, who did what I think is my favorite remix of Church's song Leave a Trace, was recently hurt in Mexico, and Church's fans in this podcast would like to wish him a quick recovery. There'll be a link to the remix in the show notes and to his Twitter handle so you can send him well wishes. So the last news item number 6, while technically not new news, but it is new news to me. Back in 2014, Churches played an VH1 event with 2 bands that I recently was introduced to by other Churches fans. The bands are Echo Smith and Bleachers. There was a picture of Echo Smith and Churches posted from that event, which I had not seen before. And there is a video of Lauren singing the song Go Your Own Way with Bleachers that was also posted on YouTube and Twitter. The performance seems a little rough at the very beginning, like there were some technical difficulties or things were just a little out of sync. But as the song goes on, it gets better. Anyway, both bands, at Echo Smith on Twitter and at Bleachers on Twitter, are worth checking out, and links will be in the show notes. If you have any news that you'd like to share with other fans, then please let me know on Twitter at Churches Podcast, or send me email at churchespodcast@gmail.com.
You
That short song segment was Downside of Me that was released this past April as part of a fundraising campaign for Planned Parenthood. I love the vocal changes, the piano, and the keyboard sequencing. It's a great new version of the song, and I've been listening to it a lot. It was track number 8 on Church's second album, Every Open Eye. So today's fan Q&A interview is with Bruce, who's at McMullen1776 on Twitter. It was my distinct pleasure of meeting in person with Bruce during a trip I had to Texas in May. It was an awesome evening of talking churches between fans. Bruce had already recorded his answers to the fan questions, so we decided not to record our conversation that evening. But a lot of what we talked about in person is in Bruce's interview. I'm going to deliver the interview in parts over the next couple of podcasts. So I think in this podcast we get through the first 4 questions. The interview starts off with Bruce introducing himself.
My name is Bruce. My Twitter is McMullen1776. I'm a mechanical designer for a company that engineers and manufactures equipment for the cement industry, and I live in Dallas, Texas.
Thanks, Bruce, for that intro. It was a highlight of my trip to Texas to chat with you about churches and to meet you in person. So the next question is, how did you become a CHVRCHES fan?
In October 2015, I was on Yahoo News, and a Yahoo live stream popped up and started to play in a pop-up box. I enlarged the pop-up box and turned the volume up, and wow, I really liked what I was hearing. I immediately liked the music and the singer's voice. In the background was the large CHVRCHES banner, and that's how I got the band's name. I watched the whole live stream and really enjoyed the performance. I could not believe Martin's dancing to Under the Tide. He has so much energy, and his feet and legs seem to move so fast. Lauren's banter before the last song really made me laugh. It had to do with her being responsible for the health and safety of the band. I Googled CHVRCHES and found out who the band members were and what albums they had out. I then started searching for CHVRCHES on YouTube. I enjoyed everything that I found. From YouTube, I found out that the Yahoo live stream I had watched was not live. It was actually from April 2014. Yahoo was replaying it in October 2015. That's how I found out about CHVRCHES and how I became a fan.
That is a great story about how watching a recording of a live show was the hook into the band. So far, most fans have found the band in many different ways, and it is interesting on how varied the stories are. So how many times have you seen CHVRCHES live and where? And if more than once, what was your favorite show and why?
I saw CHVRCHES live for the first time on November 5th, 2015 at the Bomb Factory in Dallas. I found the CHVRCHES live show to have so much energy, and the lighting effects are really incredible. I really enjoyed Lauren's banter and her interaction with the audience. I was all the way in the back of the venue. Even that far back, the music was so loud that I remember feeling it in my chest. My chest was pulsing, my pant legs were bouncing off my shins. It was an incredible experience. After that show, I wanted to go to as many more shows as I could. So in December 2015, we traveled to CHVRCHES shows in Austin. That was the Emos Austin show, and in Houston at the Revention Music Center. Later that same month, we traveled to a show in Chicago, which was the Reaction New Year's Eve show on December 30th. Due to the workload at my job, I had not used hardly any of my 2015 vacation, so I was allowed to carry these 2015 vacation days over to 2016, and 2016 was turning out to be a slow year for my company. So we used the slow time at the company and the extra vacation days as an opportunity to go to some more CHVRCHES shows. In March, we went to the 2 shows at Chicago at the Riviera, followed by a trip to Austin for South by Southwest, where we saw CHVRCHES at the Spin Party at Stubbs. In April, we took an extended CHVRCHES road trip vacation and went to CHVRCHES shows in San Diego at the Observatory North Park, Santa Ana at the Observatory OC, 2 shows in Oakland at the Fox Theater, and a show in Las Vegas at the Brooklyn Bowl, Las Vegas, and another show in Tempe at the Marquee Theater. That same month, we went back to Austin for 2 shows at Stubbs, then to a show in Houston at the White Oak Music Hall, and we ended our vacation back home at the Edge Fest 26 show in Frisco, Texas. It took 22 days, and we had flown 2,048 miles and drove a total of 2,915 miles on this trip. In June, with work still slow and still being asked to book time to vacation, we took another extended churches road trip. We went to the 2 shows in Boston at the House of Blues, then the show in Cleveland. From there, we went to the Canandaigua show in New York, the Baltimore show at Rams Head Live, then to the shows in St. Augustine, Charleston, and Charlotte. April and June were the 2 big vacation road trips. After that, my family member that I was traveling with could not get off work. Meanwhile, I still had vacation time I was being asked to use because we had no projects coming in. So I went to shows in Kansas City, Providence, Rhode Island, Portland, Maine, and Milwaukee. In October, I took another vacation, this time with different family members, back to California for the 2 shows at Hollywood Forever in Los Angeles. From there, we went to Arizona for the rescheduled Tempe show from last April at the Marquee Theater. This was the show that was canceled back in April when Lauren got sick. To finish, or so I thought, my year of going to churches, I was able to go to the 2 New York shows and to the 2 shows at Echo Stage in Washington, D.C., the last show of the EOE campaign being on October 18th. Then at the end of November, I got an invitation to go to the Churches Miami show. Ironically, I was now out of vacation time. I had used my remaining 2015 and all my 2016 vacation by this point. So, to me, this is funny. I had to borrow vacation days from 2017, but it was a great show, and I'm happy that I got invited and I was able to attend. It was one of the best churches shows I have been to. 2016 was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me, having my 2015 vacation and 2016 vacation available to use in 1 year, and for 2016 to be a slow year at work made it possible. I'm glad I did it and look forward to more churches shows on the next tour. I'm going to try to go to as many as I can, but I don't think I will have another year like 2016. I would recommend it to anyone who has the opportunity to do it. Here are a few of the special moments that stood out to me. When the band invited the Furries on stage in Oakland, I loved how Lauren interfaced with them. She had a hard time trying to stop laughing, and at the same time she seemed to have a very slight uneasiness about them. I had also seen several photos of the band doing the pre-show fist bump, but I had never seen it happen live. Then one show, I can no longer remember which show, after the first few songs the band came together at the center of the stage and did the fist bump. That was awesome to see live. I saw the debut of High Enough to Carry You Over at the second night of the March Chicago shows. Seeing Martin perform We Sink at the Shorten Tempe Marquee Theater show in April. Then again at the next show at Stubbs in Austin. Then getting the Hair by the Throat live in Charlotte when the band temporarily dropped gone. Then there was the photo pose at the Santa Ana show. Then meeting Haley, one of the church's fans' Twitter account admins at the Chicago show in December. She had been in line all day in the freezing temperature. I just said a quick hello and told her I really enjoyed the church's fans' Twitter account. I've run into Haley all over the country now, from Cleveland to Milwaukee to California, and in Cleveland she was kind enough to invite me as her meet and greet +1. At this point I had been to several shows and had not yet won a meet and greet, and I was getting pretty heartbroken. And for Haley to give me this is a gesture that I will never be able to thank her enough for. I'm a really big fan, and it was a very moving experience. It's a memory that will last a lifetime. Also, the intro of every show when the house lights dim and the show lights go on and the intro music starts to play. I'm an emotional person, and that gets me every show. I also love the Hello, we are a band called Churches. I love that, and I hope Lauren continues to say it on the next tour.
Wow, Bruce, that was an expressive retelling of all those shows that you've been to. I don't think I was able to keep count as I was listening, but I'm willing to say it was a boatload. I'm very bummed that we were both at the San Diego show and Hollywood Forever show, and we're not able to connect then. I do think the onstage fist bump by Churches was at the San Diego Observatory show that we were both at. And yes, that was awesome to see live. The next question is, what is your favorite Churches song and why?
It's hard to pick one. I really like them all. I really like Lies, Recover, Tether, We Sink. They are all so good. Until Churches, I have never followed a band where every song has resonated with me, and this has happened with both albums now. If I had to pick just one, I would have to say that my favorite song would be Longs. I love the sound of Lauren's voice in general, but especially on this song. And I like when Lauren's and Martin's vocals overlap, and I just really like the music on this song. Sadly, I never got a chance to hear it live.
First up, I'd like to thank Bruce for taking the time to share his answers with us and for taking the time to meet up with me in Texas. He also gave me 2 awesome Churches posters that I need to get framed and put up in my podcast recording room. I really appreciate the gifts. Thanks a lot again, Bruce. The rest of Bruce's answers will be in a future podcast, so stay tuned. If you'd like to be a fan Q&A participant in the future, then please let me know at churchespodcast@gmail.com or message me on Twitter @churchespodcast.
You are listening to the CHVRCHES Podcast.
Today's band interview was recommended to the podcast by David, who's at DavidJames06 on Twitter. It is with Ian and Lauren and recorded in 2013. It is a 4-part interview, and we will play part 2 today. You can listen to part 1 in the last podcast. This was originally recorded and posted by FaceCulture. Thank you, David, for this pointer.
Can you take us back to the first session in October 2011? What were you working on, and why did you ask her?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? In 2011?
Yeah, 2011, in October 2011.
In October 2011.
You had your first session?
Yeah.
It turned out really good. What were you working on, and why were you thinking to ask her?
Well, we weren't really, initially, Doc Martin, who isn't here just now, it was just he was going to be the singer in the band, and him and I were just going to do it as a duo, and so we started writing some songs, and I think after a while we thought it might be nice to get another singer in, have like a 3-piece on the go. And just at the time I was producing Blue Sky Archives, and I'd illegally played Doc a couple of tunes, which apparently is unprofessional. I'm always reminded about this. And yeah, immediately Martin was like, "Oh my God, we need to get Lauren down to try out some vocals on this track."
Why specifically this track? Why her vocals?
Her vocal is very distinctive. Like as soon as you hear Lauren singing, you know it's Lauren. There's nobody else that sounds like her. Sorry, you're here and it's weird talking about you while. I didn't say it was good. I just said it was distinctive.
It's true. It's just like it's individual.
And that's something. It's just that quality that we wanted. Something that was immediately, oh, that's that band, or that's that singer, you know. And that's what I heard in Lauren's voice, and that's what Martin did. And yeah, when we tried out, it just seemed to work pretty well.
What song did you do?
What was the first song you sang on?
I think there was an old demo. I don't think it made it into Churches as the band is. It was something those guys had worked on. It was really
Manhattan or Ted?
I think it was Talking in My Sleep, and it showed that you guys had really been listening to the Drive soundtrack, and I really liked it, but it was really like. It was really like Kandinsky kind of, and it was really cool, but it didn't. I think once we started writing as a unit, it kind of changed the sound a bit in terms of, I don't know how things are put together. And
so when did you decide to actually work together as a three-piece?
I think we did that demo and maybe like another track, which didn't make it into Churches officially.
And then we kind of had a meeting in a pub and said, let's be a band.
Shall we write songs as a group? And we were like, okay. And that's what we are now.
Yes.
So.
Okay, well, sounds good. In May previous year, you released your first single, second single in September, and you've had enormously good reviews. What did this do to you?
Made me not go on the internet anymore. Yeah. Obviously, we've been really, really fortunate that people reacted so well. But I think if you go on the internet and read all this great stuff about yourself, you'll lose your mind.
But you don't even see the great stuff. You only see the
I
negative
like to
stuff.
troll through and see like the horrible comments that people have written, where someone's been like really, really nasty, and then I like to think about those as I go to sleep at night time.
To make new music doesn't make harder if you know people really like your music or they hate your music?
Not from my point of view, no. I think what it does is it gives you a sense of urgency. It's like, because at that point when we put that song out, we'd never really thought about playing live. Not really. We had an idea that we could probably do it, but when Lies started gathering a bit of momentum, we were like, let's learn how to do this, and it was kind of a bit of a rush to do that. But no, I don't feel it's been harder to write songs.
No, I think we're in a really fortunate position that because people have reacted so well, we hope there's people excited about stuff that we'll put out in the future. So I think it's just important to keep your head in the game and not get distracted by that stuff and write something good for the people that want to buy it, I guess. Which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do that now. Well, not right now because we're here, but when we go home, we're going to do more. So.
And you've also been featured in the, now it's getting a big thing, the BBC Sound Off 2013. Do you know any previous winners from that poll?
Azalea Banks won last year, didn't she? Oh, personally, do we know them personally?
No, I mean...
To be weird, I was like, your friend
Adele won, I think.
Adele, yeah.
Jessie J, was she one?
She did win one year, didn't she?
So. See, I feel like when it's come out in previous years, I've looked through the long list and been like, a bunch of bands, but probably haven't listened to the winners so much. Not because I don't think they're good acts, but it's just not something I would personally listen to that much. But I think like this year there was stuff like Savages were on the list, and I'm a big fan of them and stuff. So I think it's quite cool that it was a very varied mix of stuff. And I guess, I think like Haim were an interesting choice for winning because they're pop, but not in the same way that like Jessie J is pop or something. And I think it was interesting.
Yeah,
and someone said to me it was all like, other than Ian Martin and the guy from Aluna George, it was all ladies. George from Aluna George. It was all women in the top 5 for the end, which is pretty cool. It was all like female vocals, which is kind of unusual.
It is unusual.
Like I mentioned earlier, this interview was in 2013, just before the Recovery EP was released. The answers from both Lauren and Ian during the early days of the pre-band were pretty interesting. I'd really like to hear the pre-Churches tracks Talking in My Sleep in Manhattan someday. I also like that mention of the music from the movie Drive was influencing Martin and Ian early on. The Drive soundtrack is actually one of my very favorite movie soundtracks to listen to when I'm doing very detailed technical work. The movie is excellent, but actually I think I like the soundtrack better. The next podcast will have part 3 of that interview with Lauren and Ian.
You're listening to CHVRCHES Podcast.
Well, we have reached the end of today's podcast content. Don't forget that everything mentioned in this podcast that has a link will be in the show notes at churchespodcast.com, and the website has links to subscribe to the podcast via Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Thank you all for your very fine feedback I continue to get via Twitter at CHVRCHES Podcast and via email, churchespodcast@gmail.com. And I would like to deliver a super big thank you to Alyssa and Jeff for the bumpers that we've been able to play in today's podcast. If you'd like to create a bumper that is 20 to 30 seconds long and have it played in a future podcast, then just shoot me an email at churchespodcast@gmail.com. We're going to end the podcast with our tradition of playing a recommended song that fits in the very broad genre of retro 80s synth. I do not want to answer the phone now. Decline. Where were we? Retro's 80s synth. If you have a recommended song, then please let me know. Also, I've recently created a playlist of all the retro 80s synth songs recommended using Google Play Music and Spotify. I'm still working on getting a playlist for iTunes, so stay tuned. You can check out the show notes for a link to the current lists of playlists. Today's song is No Stars from the band Figures on the Beach. I have a copy of this song, No Stars, in my collection based on a series of compilation albums called Just Say from Warner Brothers Records. This song is on the album called Just Say Yes, which came out in 1987, which featured songs from bands like Depeche Mode, Echo and the Bunnymen, The Mighty Lemon Drops, James, The Smiths, The Wild Swans, etc. There were a total of 7 compilation albums released over the years. I highly recommend them if you can get a hold of them. The production on the Just Say series and the song selection is excellent, and it's sequenced very thoughtfully. There's sort of a flow between the songs and where they fit in the compilation as a whole. The band Figures on the Beach came from the Detroit area and were active from 1981 to 1991. They had another pretty popular song, Accidentally 4th Street, and a remake of the song You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet that had some radio play and charting. The song sample from No Stars is from the main chorus, but there is toward the middle end of the song a great piano part that I highly recommend. So check out the whole song if you get a chance. There'll be a link in the show notes to a YouTube MTV music video of No Stars. Thank you so much for sharing your passion for churches with me. I continue to say this community is awesome because it really is. This has been Steve Holden for Churches Fan Podcast. Have a great day. Really, have a great day. The Churches Fan Podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 International License by Steve Holden and AztecMedia.net. All rights reserved 2016 through 2017. If you have questions, then please email churchespodcast@gmail.com. Fair use notice. Reference material and media have been placed within this medium for informational, educational, and discussion purposes only, in compliance with the fair use criteria established in Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. It should also be noted that the opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the participants and are not endorsed by the participants' previous, current, or future employers or advertisers, or any entity officially associated with churches. The song you are currently listening to is called The Enemy Is Him, the Dream Child Mix, from the movie The House of Him. You can get more information about the movie at Vimeo/on-demand/The House of Him. The song was scored for the film by Ian Cook and David Robert Simpson, and you can learn more about David's work at filmcomposer.scott.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.